Hello world, Julia here, and in today's video we're going to be building this awesome responsive website. The really cool thing about it is that we will learn how to use keyframes animations to create an animation just like the one you see right here. We will also be using an animate on scroll library called scroll reveal to trigger these animations you see here as soon as we get to each individual section. Also, if this website looks familiar, you feel like you've seen it before, then you probably have. It's what I based off the squeeze tutorial a while back, which is a design by George Olaru from dribble.com. And if you ask me, my build looks almost exactly the same, if not the same, as you can see right here, except for the footer, which looks different. But other than that, it looks practically the same. If I go into the inspector and then responsive view, you'll see that this website is fully responsive, as you can see right here. So if you guys want to see more videos like this one, please consider subscribing and turning on bell notifications. I post videos like this one every Sunday. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please give it a like and share with your friends. Also, be sure to follow me on Instagram so that you can keep up with weekly channel updates. I also have a Patreon account which you can use to support the channel. You can also get extra perks such as the source code just for being a Patreon. Now, let's get right into it. So for this particular project, we only need a couple things. The first one is going to be the font awesome CDN because we will be using several icons, and we also need the scroll reveal CDN, which is the JavaScript library that we will use to trigger the animations on scroll. On the sidebar, I also have an images folder with several images, but as usual, if you guys want to follow along with me, I will be placing a link to a GitHub repo in the description below. There you can find the starter files that will include everything you see here, as well as the style sheet and the main.js, which are empty except for the style sheet, which I have already done a few things here, but for now don't worry about it. We'll go over it once we start styling the website. Now what I'll do is just minimize this so that I can have more space to work with, and I'll open up my file in the browser. I'm also going to make this smaller just so that I can have them side by side. What we want to do now is go into the body, and the first thing we'll do is just open up the header tag. The header is going to hold all the information for the navigation, including the logo. But before we do any of that, what I want to do is open up a div with the class of container. The container div is basically just going to hold all of the elements throughout the site that will include the navigation, each section, and so on. This way we can keep the site looking consistent. Once we create the container div, we want to open up the nav tag, and we will also assign it a class of nav. Then in here, we want to create a div with the class of menu toggle. Inside of this div, we will have two different icons from Font Awesome. One of them is going to be for the hamburger menu, and the other one is going to be an X, so that we can close the menu later on with JavaScript. So for the hamburger menu, we just need to get the I and apply the class of FAS, as well as a secondary class of FA bars. And as you can see now, once the page loads, the hamburger menu appears. Since the other icon is going to be almost the same, we can just copy it and paste it down below. And now we can just change bars to times. And now we have the icons that we need. We can go underneath of the menu toggle div, and what we want to do here is open up an anchor tag with the class of logo. This anchor tag is going to be for the logo, as I mentioned, so we also want to make it clickable. And what happens when we click it? Well, we want it to go back to the index.html. Then inside of the anchor tag, I want to place an image. This is going to be the logo image. So we're going to go into the images folder and we want to find the image with the name of logo-rosa. And as of right now, you can't see it, but that's because it's blending in with the background. But it's right here, as you can see. Now, what we want to do is create the basic structure for the navigation. That will be a UL with the class of navlist. Inside of this UL, we will have several list items. The list item will have the class of navitem. Then inside of it, we're going to have another list, not a list item, but an anchor tag with the class of navlink. And for now, I'll just say that it's not going anywhere. We're going to keep reusing this over and over again. So what we want to do now is just copy this li. And now, since this one is going to be for home, I can just go back and again, make sure that the href points to the index.html. And then we can just say that the text inside of it is going to be home. Now that we have that, we can go underneath of this li right here, and we can paste another one. This one will be for the menu. Then we have to do the same thing several times. After the menu, you can say reservations. After reservations, we can say news, then shop, and we need one more. And this one will be for contact. So this is basically the basic structure of our navigation. What we want to do now is just go right here and make a comment that lets us know that this is where the header ends. So now underneath of this comment, we want to open up a section tag with the class of hero. We also want to apply the ID of hero to this section as well. And the reason for that is because at the footer, we're going to have a little arrow that is going to be animated pointing up so that when we click it, it's going to send us all the way back to the top of the page. And we will use this ID right here to match that arrow with the section. Again, what we want to do is just keep the site consistent. So we will be placing another div in here with the class of container. Now inside of the container, I want to open up an h2 with the class of sub headline. Inside of this headline, I'm going to also have a span, and the span will have the class of first letter. And that actually reminds me that there's a pseudo element that we can use called first letter, but for the time being, since I already did it this way, we'll just keep it as it is. So what we want to do here is just place the first letter inside of the span, and it's going to say welcome. Now we want to go underneath of the h2 and we want to type in h1 with the class of headline. This headline will be the name of the restaurant, which is the Rosa. Then what we want to do now is just create a div with the class of headline description. Inside of this div, we want to have another div with the class of separator. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to be applying flexbox to this div so that I can align my lines that you saw from the demo as well as the asterisk right in the middle, both on the x-axis and the y-axis. So the next step is just to have another div. This time, this one will have the class of line as well as a secondary class of line left. What we want to do now is copy this because we will need it for the next line. Although before we do that, I will open up a div with the class of asterisk. And in here, we want to have a font awesome icon with the class of FAS and then the secondary class of FA asterisk. And as you can see, now we get the icon. So underneath of this div, we want to paste this other line, and as opposed to having another line left, we want to say that it's line right. Now we want to go underneath of the separator div, and we want to open up another div, and this one will have the class of single animation. The reason for that is because the text that I'll be placing in here is going to have the same animation as the button. So as opposed to applying the animation on both of them, I can just say that I can group them together in this inside of this div, and then I can just apply the animation to this div instead, and both of them will have it. So the next step is going to be an H5, and it's going to say ready to be opened. And then underneath of the H5, we want to have a button. In this case, we will use an anchor tag to create it. So the anchor tag will have the class of BTN as well as a secondary class of CTA BTN. The reason for that is because since we have multiple buttons throughout the website, we want to apply certain styles that they all share to this BTN class so that we can keep reusing them. And then this one can just be a hash since it doesn't really go anywhere. So now that we did the header as well as the hero, let's not forget to add a comment. Hero ends. Now that we have that, we're going to go into the CSS and we can style the hero section as well as the header. So as you can see, I'm importing some fonts from Google Fonts, and these are the ones that we will be using throughout the site. Then I'm doing a basic reset on the margin and padding, and I'm setting the box sizing to border box, and this is going to make our life a lot easier when it comes to calculating the paddings and all of that stuff later on. Then if you've never seen this before, this is basically how you declare CSS variables. You use a column, and then the root, it refers to the document, and then how people normally name their variables is that they use 2 dashes and then followed by whatever it is that you want to name it. So for example, right here I have a variable -- main font, which is set to source sans pro, and it has a fallback of sans serif. Just in case that this font is not available, then this will take over. The same thing for my secondary font and my body font. Then I have a main font color, so again right here I'm just using the hex value for that particular color as well as the rest of them. You could set width, height, and all that sort of stuff as well when it came to variables. So why would you use them? Well, let's say that you're using these fonts right here throughout the entire site, and let's say that later on you decided that you wanted a different font. So as opposed to basically going through all the CSS and replacing every single instance of whatever font it was that you used, if you used a variable, you can simply just change it right here and it will change everywhere that you used it. So that's why you should use variables. Now we can go ahead and select the HTML document. And here is a demonstration on how you use CSS variables. So in this case, I'll set my font family, and this is going to be for the body font. So to use the variable, you just say var and then parentheses, and then inside of here you use the variable name. In this case, it's going to be body font. Then I'm setting my font size to 10 pixels, and the reason for that is because I'm going to be using rems, which is relative to the root of the document, which is the HTML. So it just scales a lot better when it comes to responsive design, and again, it makes everything manageable. So next, what I want to do is just set a color. Again, I'm going to use a variable, and this one will be the body font color. Finally, what I want to do now is set my scroll behavior to smooth. And what this is doing is basically that once we get to the footer and we click that little arrow that's going to send us all the way back up, as opposed to jumping to that spot, it's going to animate it and make it smooth. So it saves us a lot of time, because normally people would do this with JavaScript. So now we can just do it with one simple line of CSS. And let me just scroll this down a bit so that we have some more room. The next step is to select each section. And what I want to do is just apply some padding. So the padding top and bottom is going to be set to 3.9 rem. And this is going to be on the top and bottom, and then 0 left and right. Underneath of the section, what I want to do is target all of my images. So I'll use the image tags, and then I'll say that the width is going to be 100%. And then I'll also set a max width to 100%. This will make sure that even if the image is too big for the section, it's not going to overflow its parent. Then I want to select all of my anchor tags, and I'll say that the text decoration will be set to none. Finally, I'll select my p tags, and I'll give it a font size of 1.6 rem. What I want to do now is style my container. So the container is going to have a width of 100%, but it's also going to have a max width of 122.5 rem. This means that the container is only going to be 1,225 pixels as far as the width. But once we get under this particular pixel rate, this will take over, so it's going to be taking 100% of the available width. Something else that we want to do here is make sure that we center the container right in the middle. So for that, we can do a margin of 0 top and bottom, and then auto for left and right. And what we can do now is go ahead and say that we want to do a padding left and right, and that will be 2.4 rem. And that's going to be pretty much it for the container. What we want to do next is select, I believe, the header. So what we want to do now, again, is just create another comment, and we will say that the header styles will be here. And it's a good practice to use comments, because that way, if you want to come back to a specific part, you can find it a lot easier. So what we want to do now is just select the header, and we want to give it a width of 100%. We also want to give it a position of absolute. The reason for that is because I'm going to be using a transparent navigation, so I want my header to sit on top of my hero. So it's just going to be floating there. I also want to make sure that it starts at 0 from the top and then 0 from the left. I'm also going to use a C index of 1 just to make sure that it stays on top of everything right here. Next, I'm going to be applying a background image, which is going to be a linear gradient, and it's going to be going to the bottom, and then it's going to have an RGBA color of 000, which is black, and then a transparency of 0.5. Then the second color is just going to be transparent. So now we can see everything underneath it, or actually on top of it, I should say, a lot better. So now we want to go underneath of the header, and we want to select the nav. What we want to do here is just give it a fixed height of 7.2 rem. Then we want to say that it will be a display of flex. This is just going to help with alignment. Then align items, we'll set it to center. And we also want to set the justify content to center. So this way we can have it perfectly centered in on the X and Y axis, as you can see right here. Now underneath of the nav, what we want to do is select the icons. So before we do that, we just want to style the container for the icons, which we named menu toggle. We simply just want to give it a color of white. Then we want to increase the font size. And we also want to give it a position of absolute. Then we want to say that it will be positioned 50% from the top. And then we want to translate y of negative 50%. This is just going to make sure that it's going to be perfectly centered right here in the header. But now what we want to do is set it to a right of, let's say, 2.5 rem. As you can see right here, this is the perfect spot. Once we do that, we want to give it a cursor of pointer. So now when we hover over it, it gives it the illusion that it's clickable. Kind of like how an anchor tag works. Then I'll give this a C index of a high value such as 1500 just to make sure that it stays on top of everything. This will be handy later on when we do the navigation. Then what I want to do is just hide this X because we don't need it. We only want to see this icon right here for now. So we can just use the Font Awesome class for that, which is FAA times. And then we can just simply say display will be set to none. Now what we can do is just style the nav list. So as far as the nav list, what we want to do here is just have a navigation for the mobile style, since this is going to be mobile first. So first of all, we'll get rid of the list style by setting it to none. So this just gets rid of the bullet marks. Once we do that, we want to set it to a position of fixed. So now it's going to be floating. Then we're going to give it a top of 0, and we want to move it 0 to the left. What we want to do now is give it a width of 80%. And I think I also gave it a height of 100 of the viewport height. What I want to do now is just set a background color. Again, I will be using a variable, and here I will be using the main font color dark. Although it says it's for a font, I figured it would fit perfectly with the color we needed right here, so I'm just using this color as the background. Then I want to give it some padding all around. And what I want to say is that the padding will be 4.4 rem. Then I want to make sure that I make this nav list a flexed container. So I'll do a display of flex just so that I can better align all of my content right here. Since the default behavior of flex is going to be to set them into a column, we'll set it back to a row. Oh, actually to a row is the default behavior. We want to set it back down to a column. So we can do a flex direction of column. And as you can see, it's all nice and neat. Now we want to align it. So for that, we can just say that we want to justify the content space around. And this is just going to divide all the space around each individual list item. So it's going to be like some space around here, some space around here, and so on. What we want to do now is just give it another C index of a high value. But in this case, I want this to be behind this hamburger menu all the time. So instead, I'll just say that the C index will be 1250. What's next? Well, we have to hide this, but we still have to style the links and we still want to be able to see it. So for now, what we'll do is just say that the transform translate X, and the reason for this is because as opposed to using the left position, I will be using translate X, which is more efficient when it comes to doing the animations. So what I want to do here is just translate X to the negative 100%. And as you can see now, we can no longer see it. We also want to apply a transition on the transform, and it's going to be over 0.5 seconds. But remember that we still need to see it so that we can see the styles for the nav items and the links. So for now, we can just comment this out. We'll go underneath of the nav list, and what we want to do next is style the... Actually, if you remember from the demo, I had a color right here as some sort of overlay or underlay, I guess you should say, which when this is opened, the navigation, it's going to be a darker color over here. So for that, we can just simply say that we'll use a pseudo element on the nav. The reason for that is because if I do it on the nav list, I'm not going to be able to place it behind it. So I'm going to do it on the nav instead. So for that, we can say nav before. We want to make sure that we set the content to an empty string, because if we don't, then it's not going to show up. And the position is going to be fixed as well. Then the top will be 0. The left will be 0. And what we want to do now is again set the width, this time to 100 of the viewport height. Actually, viewport width. Then we want to set the height to 100 of the viewport height. What we want to do now is set a background color. This background color is going to be an RGBA. It's going to be black, and the transparency is going to be 0.8. And as you can see now, we get the nice background here. What we want to do now is make sure that we also give it a C index so that it stays on top of everything else, but we still want it to be behind this nav list. So we'll just simply do 1000. Now we can do an opacity of 0. And this is just going to hide it. Later on, we will use JavaScript so that when we open the menu, everything will be showing again. And even though we can't see it, it is still there. So that means that we have to scale it down to 0 so that it hides it completely. So we can do a transform scale of 0. And we will be using an animation here on the opacity, so we can say transition opacity, and then it's going to be 0.5 seconds. The next step will be to actually decide what happens once we click on this hamburger icon. So for that, we want to create an open class, and we will apply this open class through JavaScript to the body element. And then once the body element has it, it means that the items inside of it is going to have a specific style. So in this case, I will select the FAA times, and what I want to do is say that I want to show it. So I'll do a display of block. Remember that we initially hid it. Then I'm going to have another one for the bars. And what I want to do is just hide them by setting the display to none. So basically, when the class of open is applied, the X will be shown, and then the hamburger menu will be hidden. Now what I want to do is just make sure that we can reset back the navigation to its initial state. So again, we can just do open, and then we can select the nav list. And what we want to do here is just transform translate X by setting it back to 0. So again, we want to also apply this on the before pseudo element for the nav. So we can say open and then nav before, and we want to set the opacity right back to 1, and then the transform scale back to 1. So now if we scroll up back to the nav list where we commented this out, if we go into the HTML and we scroll up to the body and we apply the class of open, you'll see that now we get the navigation as well as the overlay for the body right here. And then the X is also going to come in, and then if I remove it, everything is going to go back to normal. So now we can just use JavaScript to basically create the click event. So that's going to be pretty simple. What I'll do is basically create a select element function. So let me just make a comment. And what I want to do here is just say const select element, and we want to set it to a function, and this function will take an argument of element. Actually, let me just make sure use the semicolon. So what I want to do here is just return document, and then I can say query selector, and then I just want to pass in element. So basically I will call this function right here, and then whatever class or element or ID that I pass in is going to be returned to me. So what I'll do now is just create some variables. So I'll say menu toggler, and I guess we could use constant, or actually I'll just leave it as it is. Doesn't really matter at this point. So what I want to do here now is select, is called the select element function. It kind of works like jQuery a little bit, how you just select each element that you want. So it works in a similar way. And then here I just pass in the class of what I want to select, which is going to be the menu toggle. And then I'll do the same by copying and pasting it down below. And now this is going to be for the body. And what I want to do here is just grab the body element. And now that I have them stored into variables, I can just go ahead and add an event listener to the menu toggler variable. And then this is going to be listening for a click event. And then in here, what we want to say is that I want to select the body and I want to toggle the class list of open. So now, if I go ahead and refresh this, you'll see that once I click on the, actually I'll have to actually reload this as well. So now when I click on my button, all the open classes are being applied. So if I make this bigger and I open up the inspector, take a look at the body right here. So once I click it, you'll see that the class of open is going to be applied. And if I click it again, it's going to be removed, which is exactly what we wanted. So again, since we want to be showing the navigation, just for the sake of seeing the styles that we're applying, we'll keep it open. So the next step is to be going under the open class for the nav before. And what we want to do is just style the rest of the navigation and its items. So that's going to be pretty simple as well. What I want to do is just apply a border bottom to the nav item. So I'll select the nav item and I'll say that the border bottom will be 2 pixels, solid, and then RGBA of white, but it's going to be 30% transparent. So it's not going to be looking white at all. Now I'll select the nav link. Should be link actually. And I want to say that they will be set to display of block. Then the color is going to be set to white. Should be color, not content. Then we can say that the text transform is going to be set to uppercase. I also want to increase the font size to 1.6 rem. Then what I want to do is give it some letter spacing of 2 pixels. And usually what will happen is that when you use a letter spacing, if it's noticeable enough, the item will actually be moved a little bit to the left. So what we can do is just give it a margin right of negative 2 pixels, and it's going to move it back. And then I'm going to be doing a basic hover effect, so I want to do a transition on the color over 0.5 seconds. So now I'll do the hover effect. And then what we want to do here is just set the color. We will be using a variable, and the color will be the secondary font color. So now when we hover over the item, you can see it turns yellow or gold. So what we want to do now that we styled the navigation is styled the hero. So for now, we can just close this. Again, let's make a comment so that we know where we are. And let me just make up some more space so that we have more room to work with. And the hero is going to be pretty simple. So what I want to do is select the hero, and I'll give it a width of 100%. Then I'll give it a height of 100 of the viewport height. Now I want to select the background, and what I want to do is apply a background image. So we're going to go into the images folder, and then we want to select hero.jpg, or in this case JPG. I want to make sure that the position is center and that it doesn't repeat. Then I'll do a background size of cover. And now I will be using flexbox to align my text right in the middle, both on the X and Y axis. So I'll say that display will be set to flex, align items to center, and as you can see now it's moving, and then justify content to center as well. So even though it didn't change, the reason for that is because it's actually in the middle right here. But what we have to do is just text align it to the center. So actually we don't even need this. All we have to do, since it's already display of block is taking all the available width, so we can just replace this with text align to center, as you can see right there. What we want to do now is style the headline. Actually, before we do the headline, we have to do the sub-headline. So for the font size, I will say that it's going to be 8.5 rem. Then I want to say that the font family, again, it's going to be a variable. This one is going to be the secondary font. And then for the color, variable again, it's going to be the secondary font color. So as you can see, it's already looking a lot better. What I want to do now is give it a lighter font weight. So in this case, I'll say 100. Even though if you did like 300 or 400, it's still the same. Even 500, because I think it starts at 600. But for the for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just do 100. So what we want to do after that is set a line height of 0.4. And this is just going to bring everything closer, as you can see. Then I also want to have some letter spacing, 2 pixels, and then again I'll use a margin right, or in this case it's not even necessary. So what I'll do is just say that actually we will wait until we finish the entire layout before we start animating this right here. So for now, we'll just keep these styles and then we'll revisit this right here. So for the time being, let's just go underneath of the sub headline and target the headline. What we want to say, actually, before we do the headline, we want to target the first letter because we wanted to make it a little bit bigger than the text right here. So first letter, we'll say that the text transform will be set to uppercase and we want to make it slightly bigger. So the font size here is going to be 10.3 rem. So that's a lot better. Now we can go ahead and style the headline. So the headline is going to have a color of white and a font size of 3.7 rem. Now we want to select, actually what we want to do is set a font family. And this is going to be a variable for the main font. As you can see, it looks a lot better now. The next step is to text transform to uppercase. I want to give it a really bold font weight, so I'll set it to 900. And then the letter spacing can be 0.5 rem. and then I'll give it a margin right of -0.5 rem. And as you can see, it just moves it back slightly. Again, we will be doing the animations towards the end of the video, so we will just revisit everything later on. We're going to be using keyframes to create the animations from scratch, so make sure you stay till the end of the video so that you can learn a really cool way of animating things on your own. Now, underneath of the headline, what we want to do is just style the separator. So let's select the separator. And remember, I mentioned we were going to do to use flexbox to align everything. So now everything is right here. But actually, for a reference, what I'll do is just leave it empty for now. I'll create the lines so that you can see better how this is working later on. So let's just select the line underneath of the separator. And for this, we want to set a max width of 8.4 rem. We want to make sure that it has a height, so this is going to be 0.25 rem. Now we want to make sure that we also give it a background color so that we can see it. And there it is. Now what I want to do is give it a position of relative, because we will be using a pseudo element later on to create a little arrow right here at the end of each line. And what I'll do now is actually go back to the separator, and I'll do a display of flex. For now, you can't see it, but once we do a align items of center and then a justify content of center, everything should be visible, and I'm not exactly quite sure why it's not showing up. Let me just make this bigger to see where they are. Max width, position of relative. Not exactly sure what happened there. Let's just inspect the HTML document. So inside of the separator, then we have the asterisk, display of flex. So we'll just say width 100%. So there it is. The reason was because I set a max width, but I also needed to set the width initially. So now we can see how Flexbox is helping align this a lot better. And if I could only get this. So now let's just go back down. And if I comment these two lines out, you'll see that now it's going to be at the starting position. And then when I do align item center, it's going to make sure it's right in the center in the y-axis. And then when I do justify content, it's going to center it in the x-axis. So now that we have that, what we can do is go underneath of the line, and we want to select the line left and line right to create a pseudo class, actually pseudo element. So line right before, line left before. We want to set the content, and we want to say that the position will be set to absolute. We also want to make sure that it has a border color. Well, not exactly in this situation, but the way I will be creating that little triangle at the end is by using borders. So we can easily do that by saying border. And then we can say it's going to be 0.6 rem. And then it's going to be solid. And we want to make it transparent. So we're not going to be able to see it. But this is where we actually make sure that we can see it by just setting a border right, border bottom color. It's actually border right color. We can set it to white. So as you can see now, we can start seeing the triangle. But since I'm actually applying colors to both of them right here, I would rather do them individually since they will have different angles. So for now, I'll just delete this. And actually, I'll leave it as it is just so that you guys can see how I'm aligning things. So for that, we can just do a top. Actually, I'll do it right here after the position absolute. And I'll say that the top will be 50%. And now I want to translate it on the Y, negative 50%. And as you can see, it's right in the middle now. And now that we can see them, or actually know where they are, we can get rid of this right here. Now what we will do is just select each one of them individually. So in this case, I'll say line right. And I'll say that the border right color is going to be FFF. So setting it to white. And then what I want, and let's make sure that's the pseudo element. So what I want to do now is say that the right starting position will be 0. So now it's at the end. Now we can just do the same thing for the left before. Let's make sure we change it. And we can say that the border left color will be white. And then left of 0. And now you can see that they're both sitting at the opposite ends. And that's how we create those little triangles using borders as opposed to using a width and height and then just like messing around with the values. So it makes it a lot easier when you want to create certain shapes. Now we'll go ahead and select the asterisk. We want to increase the font size by setting it to 1.2 rem. We want to make sure that the color is going to be consistent with the same color we have right here. So we can say it's going to be the secondary font color. Then I want to apply some margin left and right. So it's going to be 1.6 rem. And it's just going to create some separation between the lines and the asterisk. What I want to do next is go ahead and select, actually all of these elements right here are going to have animations, but remember that I mentioned that we will be doing them towards the end of the video. So for now, we'll just worry about styling the rest of the website and then we'll revisit those that need the animations. So what we want to do now is select the headline description H5. So headline description H5. And what we want to do here is just say that the color is also going to be white. The font size will be set to 1.4 rem. The font weight is going to be really light. Should be weight. Then we want to text transform to uppercase. We also want to give it a margin bottom just so that we can separate the button that we will be creating later. So margin bottom, we can just set it to, let's do 1.2 rem. And then the letter spacing will be set to 3 pixels. And then we can do a margin right of negative 3 pixels to bring it right back. So now we will style the btn. Since we will be reusing this class, we want to make sure that we place all the styles that this, like the particular buttons, will share. So in this case, they will share a display of inline block and a text transform of uppercase. And they will also share a letter spacing of 2 pixels. And then again, let's bring back the text by saying a margin right of -2 pixels. So now what we can do, and something that we forgot was to actually place some text inside of the button. So here we can just say explore. As you can see now, the button is showing up. Now we can style this specific button. So we can say CTA button or BTN in this case. Let me make some more room underneath. So what we want to do now is just give it a font size of 1.1 rem. I'm also going to give it a background color of white. And then some padding. Top and bottom, I'll say 0.9 rem. And then I'll say 1.8 rem left and right. And for the color, I'll just use a variable, which is going to be body. Or actually, it's already... No, it's actually not being applied because it's an anchor tag. So here I can just say was it the body color or the body font color? I believe it was the body font color. So yeah, it actually looks a lot better. So what we want to do after that is just give it a border radius of something really subtle. So we'll do 0.4 rem. And then we also want to do a hover effect on the background color. So we want to do a transition of the background color over 0.5 seconds. So CTA, BTN, and then hover. And we'll also do the focus. And what we want to do here is just change the color to white and the background color. For this, we can use a variable again, and this one is going to be the secondary font color. So now when we hover over it, you can see we get the hover animation and it's being transitioned. So this is going to be pretty much it for this particular hero section. As you can see, everything is working as it should, although it's not responsive yet. We'll get to that once we build the mobile version first. So what we will do next is go back into, well, before we do that, this is going to be the comment for the discover our story. So we will be placing our CSS for that particular section right here. So what we will be doing now is going back into the HTML so that we can build out the next section, which is going to be discover our story. So underneath of the hero ends, what we want to do is open up another section, and this one will have the class of discover our story. Again, we want to keep this consistent, so we want to apply the same container class. And what we want to do now is create another div inside of it, and it will say restaurant info. And the really cool thing is that we will be able to reuse a lot of these classes throughout the site, which means that most of the times we can just copy and paste it down below for another particular section, and it's going to be exactly the same. No additional CSS will be required unless we do something different, which is usually not going to be the case. Now, inside of this restaurant info div, I want to have another div with the class of restaurant description. Now, I also want to apply some additional classes. Since we will be needing some space in between certain sections to separate images from text and text from images, I'll create a class called padding right. And then I will be also applying a class of animate left. In this class, we will be using later on to select with JavaScript when we use the scrolling animations. So once in here, what I want to do is create another div, and this is going to hold basically the headline that we will keep reusing throughout the site. So in this case, it's going to have a class of global headline. And here, what we want to do is have another h2. Actually, since we already did something similar, we can just go ahead and grab this right here. And we can go ahead and paste it down below, right here inside of the global headline. So this right here, the only thing we have to do is just change what it says. So in this case, we want to say discover, and actually it should only be one letter inside of the span. Discover. And then for the h1, we can say that is going to say our story. So something else that we want to do here, since we're going to be having a white background, and for this particular class, we used a font color of white, so we're not going to be able to see it. So what we want to do is apply an additional class, and it's going to have the name of headline dark. This way we can make sure that it's dark whenever we are inside of a white background, as you see here, because right now we can't see it. So once we have the headline in place, what we can do is just go underneath of the global headline div, and which is this one right here, and we want to open up a p tag, and we'll just use some dummy text. So we'll use lorem ipsum, and then underneath of the p tag, what we want to do is just have an anchor tag, and remember that we want to reuse the btn class, but we also want to apply another btn class, which is going to be for the body. So we can say body btn, and this one will simply just say about us. Now we want to go underneath of this div right here for the restaurant description, as you can see right here. And then we want to open up another div, and this one will have the class of restaurant info img. And then we want to use an image. The image will be in the images folder, and it will be our story 1. We also want to apply another additional class, because we remember that we mentioned that we want to animate these. So in this case, I'll say that the additional class will be animate right. So we got left and we got right. And remember, this is just the restaurant info div. It's just a wrapper for these right here, since we will be using flexbox for the alignments. So now that we got that section out of the way, we can go ahead. Well, before we do that, let's create a comment again and say that the discover our story ends here. Well, we can say ends. So now that we have done that, we can go ahead and style this particular section. So this is going to be pretty simple as well. What we want to do is just select the global headline and apply some styles to it. So we'll do that by saying global headline, and we want to text align center, as you can see right here. We also want to give it a margin top to create some separation right here. Margin top, and it's going to be of the same amount of the padding that we used for each section, which is 3.9 rem. What we want to do now is select the Discover Our Story global headline. And the reason for that, Discover Story global headline, is because this one is going to have an even bigger margin top, because we want to create more separation between this right here, as you could see from the original design. So what we want to do is just say that the margin top will be set to 6.9 rem. As you can see, it already looks a lot better. And let's just make some room. The next step is that we want to select the asterisks. And actually, now that I mentioned it, we didn't put it in. So let's do that really quick. So let's go back to the section right here. And what we want to do is just select the asterisk that we used right here. And we just simply want to place it right here underneath of the H1. And now we can see it. So remember that I mentioned that we want to select it now. Let's just say that we want to select the global headline, and then we want to select that specific asterisk inside of it. And what we want to do here is just change the color to the body color. So we can say body font color. And we also want to do a margin top and bottom of, let's say, 2.4 rem, and then 0 left and right. So that's just going to create some separation. And then it should be the margin, not just margin top right now. So now we get some space in between them. So remember that I mentioned the headline dark. So now we just want to make this one right here dark. So let's select the headline dark. And the color for this will just be the, I believe it was the main font color dark. So again, let's use that variable. As you can see, it looks a lot better now. And then I want to do a letter spacing of 0.7 rem. And then we want to do a margin right of negative 0.7 rem. And it just moves it back slightly. What we want to do now is select the sub-headline inside of the global headline. And what we want to do here is just apply a smaller letter spacing, because I believe the other one was slightly bigger. So in this case, we just want to do, actually we just want to move it slightly a little bit. So we're going to do a negative 1 rem. Or actually this should be 0.1 rem. Or in this case, it's a really small value, so we can just use pixels. It's not going to make that much of a difference anyways. And then we can just say again that the line height here is going to be 0.42. The next step will be to select the restaurant info. And we just want to text align to the center. Then we want to select the restaurant description. And we want to give it a margin bottom to create some separation here between this and the image. And it's going to be 3 rem. And again, let me just scroll down to make some more room. So now what we want to do is select the paragraph inside of the restaurant description. And then here we just want to make sure we give it a line height of 1.6 and then a margin bottom to create some separation between the P tag and the button of, let's say, 2.4 rem. Now I'll select the body BTN. And this one will just have a font size of 1.5 rem. Then a color will be again a variable. And it's going to be the secondary font color. And I'll give it a position of relative because I will be creating a pseudo element that will be kind of like a border bottom for it. So I also want to give it a hover effect on the color. So I'll transition the color and it's going to be over 0.5 seconds. And now I'll create the pseudo element for the body BTN. So I'll say body BTN before. We want to set the content again so that we can see it, and we'll do a position of absolute. The top will be 0. Actually, we don't want to do a top. We want to do a bottom. But before we do that, we'll do a left of 0. And what we want to do after that is say that the bottom will be -3 pixels. And then we want to do a background color just so that we can see it. I should have done that from the start. And the background color is just going to be the secondary font color. What we want to do after that is just do a transition. And the transition is going to be on the background color. And again, it's going to be over 0.5 seconds. And it seems like I messed up somewhere because I can't see it. Oh, that's because we still haven't given it a width or a height. So width will be 100% and the height will be 2 pixels. So now we can actually see it. And this is what I meant by the bottom position. So initially it's going to be at the top, but if I give it a bottom of -3, it's just going to push it down a little bit, and it's going to push it even more depending on the value. But I find out that 3 looks a lot closer to the original design. And now all we have to do is just create a hover effect for them. So body BTN hover, and I'll say body BTN focus. What I want to do here is just simply change the color. And this one will be the main font color. Main font color dark. And then we want to do the same for the before pseudo element. We want to say hover before. And what we want to do here, we also want to do it on focus. So body BTN, focus before. What we want to do here is just change the background color, which is going to be the main font dark color we have right here. So again, let's create a variable. Well, not create, but use the variable. And now if we hover over it, we should see the changes. So now we can just go ahead and create a comment for the next section. So the next section is going to be called Tasteful Recipes. And what we want to do here, well, for now, we're not going to do anything because we have to go back into the HTML. And this one is going to be pretty simple. There's really not much to it. So let's scroll back down to the comment we made for the discover our story ends. And we want to open up another section. And this one will have the class of tasteful recipes. And I also want to apply another additional class of between. Should be between, not between. The reason for that is because we're going to have two similar sections, and I want to apply the same styles to that particular section and the other one, so I have an additional class of between. Again, we want to have a container. And here we can just reuse the global headline that we created before. So right here, we can just go ahead and grab all of this. And we want to go ahead and paste it over here. But before we do that, there's going to be some issues with the animations that we will apply later on. So in this case, what we want to do is just wrap them up in individual divs. So we don't need the asterisk. So for now, let's just get rid of it. And right here on top of the sub headline, but still inside of the global headline, what we want to do is just create a div with the class of animate top. And now we want to grab the H2 and place it in there. Now underneath of animate top, we want to create another div with the class of animate bottom. And what we can do now is just grab this H1 right here, and we can paste it in here. And this is going to be pretty much it for this between section. So again, let's make a comment that says tasteful recipes ends. And we can go ahead and go back into the CSS. And actually, before we go and do that, let's make sure we change the text. So here it's going to be a T, and then it's going to say tasteful recipes. And now we can just go ahead and go back to the CSS. Again, this is also going to be pretty simple, not that much CSS. So what we want to do is set a background image right here. So let's select the tasteful recipes section. We want to apply a background. Again, we have to use going into the images folder. And what we want to grab is the tasteful recipes JPG. And then position will be center, set to no repeat, and then the background size will be set to cover. Now remember that the between section is going to have similar properties. What I want to do is just select the between, and I want to give it a min height. And it's going to be 65 of the viewport height. So now you can see that it's bigger, but we still have to center this text right in the middle. So for that, we can just go ahead and use flexbox. And then we can just do align items of center. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Now we can go ahead and make a comment for the next section, which is going to be called discover our menu. Now that we have that comment, we can go ahead and go back to the HTML so that we can continue to lay out the markup for the next section. So underneath of this comment, let's just make some room right down here. What I want to do is open up another section, and this one will have the class of discover our menu. Again, we want to reuse the container to keep the consistency going. And what we want to do here is just reuse some of the classes that we used before. So in this case, I'll say that the restaurant, we want to grab the restaurant info. And what we want to do in here is just create a div with the class of image group. In here, we also want to place some images, but before we do that, we also want to reuse the padding right and then we also want to use the animate classes. So animate left, and now in here we want to have 4 images. Even though we still haven't created this class right here or the styles for it, but we will later on. And the reason for that is because right now it doesn't matter since this is mobile first, but once we get into the responsive view and we make it look better for larger screens, we will be creating the styles for this padding right class. Now back to the images. We go into the images folder and we want to grab menu group 1. Now we can just go ahead and copy this one and paste it 3 more times. And should have made sure it copied the whole thing. This one will be 2. This one will be 3. And this one will be 4. Now underneath of the images, what I want to do right here is say that I want to reuse my restaurant description class again. So let's open up a div with the class of restaurant description. And we also want to apply an additional class, which is going to be for the animations of animate right. And in here, we just want to use, again, the global headline. So let's make sure that we grab that from the first section. Since this one uses the asterisk, we can just grab the whole thing and we don't have to cut it out like we did before. So we're going to place it in there. And what we have to do now is just modify the text inside of it. So what we can say here is discover menu. And let's just scroll back down so that we can see what's going on. Everything looks good. And then underneath of the headline, what we want to do is just open up a p tag. Although now I realize that we could have copied the whole thing, but I guess it doesn't matter. We can just do some lorem again, and then underneath of the p tag, we can just say, again, we want an anchor tag for the button, and then it's going to be a body btn as well. And it's not going to go anywhere, and it will say view the full menu. And that's going to be pretty much it for this particular section. So again, let's go back down here and let's say discover our menu ends. And now we can go ahead and style this particular section. So let's go back into the CSS, and the first thing we have to do here is actually, the first thing I'll do is just style the these images right here. So for that, that's going to be pretty simple. We're going to be using CSS grid to align them. So we'll give it a display of grid. And what we want to do here is just use a grid template columns. And we want to use the repeat function. So we want 2 columns, 1 fraction each. So we can say 2. So now we're going to have 2. and then they're going to take up 1/fraction of the available space. So now you can see that they're all side by side. Now I want to make sure that I also give it some space in between. So for that, we can just use a grid gap. And for that, we can do 1.5 rem. As you can see, it looks a lot better. The next step for us is going to be to actually select the Discover Our Menu restaurant description, because we want to select it to give it some specific styles. So what we want to do is say Discover Our Menu, and then we want to find the restaurant description inside of it. And we want to give it a padding top of, let's say, 3 rem. And then a margin bottom of 0. What we want to do next is select the... Actually, I think that's going to be pretty much it for this section. What we want to do next is actually create a comment for the next section, which is going to be the perfect blend. So what we can do here, say the perfect. Everything is looking really good. So the next section is going to be the perfect blend, as I mentioned, and it's going to be an in-between section, which means that we can just grab this entire section right here and just slightly modify the text. So underneath of the comment, we can say that this one will be the perfect blend. And I believe that's what I called it. So actually not the perfect blend, I called it perfect blend. And what I want to do here again is going to be just modifying this, the perfect, and then this one can say blend. So now should be perfect. And now we can go back to the CSS, and what we can do is say that we want to make sure we give it the background image. So let's just select the perfect blend, and we're going to go set the background again inside the images folder, and then perfect blend, set it to no repeat, center, and then the background size is going to be set to cover. Since we already did a lot of the styles for the other section initially, we don't really need to do anything else right here, except that we forgot to change this, well, not actually change it, but remove the dark class, which is going to make this light again. So let's go back into the HTML really quick, and let's find the class right here where it says dark, right here, headline dark, and we want to remove it. And we also want to remove it from the other between section. And now you see that the text is visible. Let's scroll back down. And before we forget, let's say that this is where the perfect blend ends. Now let's go back to the styles.css, and what we want to do here is basically, actually the great thing is that we don't have to do anything else. The only thing we have to do is just basically style, well, not style, but create the markup for the final section, which is going to be for the, I believe I called it, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. let me see, I think I called it, culinary delight. So let's go back to the HTML. Well, I'm already there. So we're going to have a section with the class of culinary delight. And the cool thing again is that we can basically just reuse the first initial section that we had before. So for that, we can just go ahead and scroll all the way back up to this, the first one that we created. And yeah, this one looks fine. Let's just grab it. And what we can do is just paste it down below and in here. Should be culinary. So now all we have to do is just modify this. So here for the discover, I can say culinary. And let's remember that it's actually only the first letter. And then this can say delight. What we can say now is that the button will read make a reservation. And then here we can have two images. So in this case, we actually want to get rid of this animate right class because we don't need it. We're going to be applying different animations to the images we're going to be placing in here. So image 1 is going to be inside the images folder, delight 1. And what we want to do here is just apply a class of animate top. Now we can just go ahead and copy this, paste it down below, and we can change top to bottom, and then this 1 to 2. And that's basically all there is for the main sections. Now, what we can do is just go ahead and style the footer. Actually, before we style the footer, we actually have to work with the footer, to be honest. And image group. Oh, now it makes sense why this wasn't working right. It's because we need the styles for the grid. So remember that we have to change this particular class to image group. And now you see that everything works beautifully. So now let's create the comment that says culinary delight ends. And we can start working on the footer itself. The footer is going to be pretty similar to the rest of the sections with some changes. So let's just open up the footer tag. And in here, we want to have a container. Again, let's make sure we keep everything consistent. So inside of this container, I want to have a back to the top arrow pointing up. So what I'll say is that I want a div with a class of back to top. And in here, I will just have an anchor tag. And remember that we use the ID of hero. And then I just want to use an icon, which is going to be FAS and the secondary class of FAA, chevron, up. And we made a mistake there. And now we should see our little icon at the bottom. Now we'll go underneath of the div for the icon, and we want to create a div with the class of footer content. Inside of the footer content, what we want to have is another div with the class of footer content about. And we also want to apply a secondary class of animate up. And here we can just have an h4 and it will read about Rosa. And in here we can also reuse the asterisk. And let's see how that's looking. Looks right. And then we can just create some dummy text again. What we want to do now is go underneath of the footer content about, right here. Let's just give ourselves some more room. And we want to create a div with the class of footer content divider. And we will use flexbox for alignment here. And let's not forget to add a class of animate bottom as well. And this one is going to be pretty simple. We just want to place the social media icons in the form. So inside of this, I'll have a div with a class of social media. And then it's just going to say, it's going to have an h4 that says follow along. And then I'll have a UL with the class of social icons. So it's going to have an LI and then an anchor tag. The first icon is going to have the class of FAB and the additional class of FA Twitter. And as you can see down here, we get the little bird. Now we can just go ahead and paste it down below 4 more times. And now we can just slightly modify the icon names. So the second one is going to be FAA Facebook Square. The third one will be Pinterest. And the fourth one will be LinkedIn. -in. And finally, this one will be TripAdvisor. So let's see if all the icons are showing up, and they are. Now we want to go under the social media, social menu. Or actually, it would make a lot more sense if I just called this social media, to be honest. I think that's initially what I thought, and then for some reason I named it social menu. So underneath of the social media div, what we want to do now is create another div with the class of newsletter container. This one will have an h4 as well, and it will say newsletter. Then in here, we can just have a form with the class of newsletter form. This should be saying form, not from. Inside of this form, we're just going to have an input with the class of newsletter input. And then we can just have a placeholder here as well. Placeholder can say your email address. And then underneath of the input, we want to have a button. The button will have the class of newsletter btn. And then it will be of type submit. And inside of the button, I want to have an icon. So it's going to be an envelope. So it's going to have the class of FAS and the class of FA envelope. And this is going to be pretty much it for the HTML markup. Now the only thing left is to style this footer, then make everything responsive, and finally do the animations. So let's jump right back into the CSS. And what we want to do here is select the footer. Before we do that, let's create a comment. The footer is going to have a padding 7.9. A background color of 12, 12, 12. A color of white for the text. Text align to the center. And a position of relative. This will come in handy when we create the arrow pointing up. Well, it's already there, but the background for it. Next step, I want to select the back to top div. And I'll give it a width of 7 rem, a height of 7 rem, and then a background color, the same as the footer. Then a position of absolute. I want to give it a top of -3 rem. What I want to do now is say left of 50%, and then a transform translate x of -50%. And now I want to give it a border radius of 50% to make it round. What I want to do now is select the icon inside of it. And this will just have a display of block, a color of white so that we can see it. We also want to increase the font size. And now we want to give it some padding all around of 2 rem. So I played around with these values, and that's why it's lining up almost right in the middle, which is where I want it. So now we can go ahead and select the footer content. And this will come in handy. For now, I'll leave it as it is, just so that I can show you guys what I'm referring to. But I'll just give it an overflow of hidden for now, and I'll comment this out. We'll come back to it later when we do the animations. The next step is to select the footer content H4. And I'll give it a font size of 1.9 rem. The text transform to uppercase. Then the font weight to 100. Letter spacing of 3 pixels, and then we'll bring it right back with the margin. Actually, we'll just leave it as it is. We'll just do a margin bottom instead to create some separation. Now we want to select the footer content asterisk, and we want to give it a margin, top and bottom of 2.4 rem, then 0 left and right. What we want to do now is select the footer content about. And here we just want to give it some margin bottom. And that's going to be 5.4 rem. And that's just going to create some additional separation right here. What we want to do next is style the p tag inside of the footer content about. And here we can just do a line height of 2. Just to create some separation. Now I want to select the social icons. And I'll just say that the list style will be none to get rid of those bullet points. I also want to give it a margin bottom of, let's say, I'll do 5.4 rem. Create some more separation right here. And keep it consistent with the separation we have right here, which is the same amount. What I want to do now is make it a flexed container. So I'll do a display of flex. And then I want to justify my content to the center to align it in the middle in the X axis. So now I want to select the icons inside of it. So social icons I, and I'll increase the font size to 2 rem. Then the color, I'll set it to white. And then I'll say that the padding is going to be, let's do 0.8 rem top and bottom, and then 2 rem left and right. The opacity is going to be toned down to half, so let's do 0.5. And I want to do a hover effect here, so I'll do a transition on the color over 0.5 seconds. And then social icons, I hover. Let's also do a focus. And what we can do here is just basically use a variable for the color. And that's just going to be the secondary font color actually. And now if you hover over the icons, we get the nice hover effect. So the next thing we have to do now is select the newsletter form. And we'll just give it a width of 100% and a position of relative, since we're going to be positioning some stuff absolutely inside of it. And I want to give it a display of flex. And now I want to justify my content to the center. Then I'll select the input, newsletter input. That's going to have a width of 100% as well. But it's going to have a max width of 25 rem. And then I'll give it some padding all around of 1 rem, followed by a small border radius of 0.4 rem. Then I'll select the newsletter BTN. And this one is just going to have a background color of transparent. Then a border of none. And the color will be the main font color dark. So for that we can just use the variable cursor, I'm going to set it to pointer. Then a font size of 1.6 rem. And then I'll do a padding top and bottom of 1 pixel, and then 0.6 rem left and right. And now I can position it absolute. It's going to be 50% from the top, then transform translate Y, negative 50% to make sure it stays right in the middle. And what I want to do now is just move it away. So that's going to be pretty simple. We can just do a transform translate. Actually, we don't even have to do that. We can just simply use margins here. So let's do a margin of left of 10.5 rem. As you can see, the button is now where we want it. And that's going to be pretty much it as far as the mobile version goes. So as you can see, everything is looking nice. The next step now is for us to make it responsive. So for that, we'll just create some media queries. So let's create another comment. And the breakpoint that I chose, we're only going to have one breakpoint. It's going to be 900 pixels. So we can say at media, screen, and since this is a mobile first approach, we use min width as opposed to using max width, and then 900 pixels. We want to do some extra padding on the section. So what we had to do here is just increase it to 7.9 rem. And let me actually make this bigger. Since we are only doing CSS, we don't really need a lot of room. So that looks a lot better. And now I'll select the menu toggler because we're going to be working on the header again. So menu toggler, or toggle, I should say, will have a display of none so that we can hide it. Next, I want to select the nav. And I'll reset the center position for the justified content to space between, because I want some separation between my logo and the nav items that I'm going to have here. Now I want to do a lot of resets on my nav list. So the first one being the position. Remember we had it at fixed. We want to set it back to initial. So now we see it floating right here. Then the width, we want to set that to initial as well. The height will be set to initial as well because we don't want one. Then we want to set the background color to transparent. And we want to get rid of the padding. So let's set it back to 0. Justified content will be set to initial as well. And then the flex direction, remember we set it back to a column. We want to set it back to row. And then we can do a transform of initial as well. Remember we want to reset all those values. And then we don't really have a transition here anymore, so we can just set the transition to initial as well. And that's basically it as far as the navigation and, well, the nav list, I should say, because now we have to target the nav items. So underneath of the nav list, we can say that the nav item is going to have a margin, well, we can say 0 right here, and then left to right, we can do 2.4 rem. And then a border bottom will be set to 0. well, we can just say to none for the bar. The border shouldn't be bottom, it should be border. What we can do now is select the last child for the nav item so that we can get rid of the extra margin that we applied right here. So this should be like for the margin in general, not margin left. So there's like, if we inspect the element right here, let me just make this smaller. You'll see that we have some extra bit of margin right here, so we want to get rid of it. So for that, we can just select again the last child for the nav item. Nav item, last child, and we want to say margin right and set it to 0. So as you can see now, it moved over. The next step will be for us to control the font size of the nav link. So nav link, we want to say that the font size will be 1.2, actually 1.3 rem. And now we want to create a class for the underline we had right here for the active state of whichever linked or page was active at the time. So for that, we'll create a class with the class. We'll create a class of active, and it's going to have a position of relative. So now what we have to do is just go back to the HTML, and we want to find the nav. So what we want to do here is select the first anchor tag right here that says home, and we want to apply a class of active. Now let's go back into the style sheet, and we want to say that the active before, and then it's going to have a position of absolute, a width of 100%, a height of 2 pixels, and then a background color of white. Now all we have to do is just move it down. So let's make sure first that it stays always at the left, or it starts from 0 to the left, and then bottom we can do -3 pixels, and it's right where we want it. So that's going to be pretty much it for that. The next step will be for us to make the sub headline bigger, and we can just increase the font size to 10 rem. We have to do the same thing for the first letter. This one will be 12.2 rem. Then the headline, and the font size here will be 4.7 rem. And then the letter spacing, we can do 0.8. Now we have to make the lines bigger. So line, the max width will be set to 11.4 rem. Now, as far as the restaurant info for this section right here, we want to make sure it reflects it so that our items are side by side. So here we can just simply say restaurant info. We can give it a display of flex, and now they're side by side. What we want to do now is align items to the center. So now you can see that they're being centered on the y-axis. Now I want to better control all the divs inside of it so that they're equal size. So what I can do here is just select again my restaurant info, and then say that I want to select all the divs directly inside of it, and I want to say that they're going to flex to have a flex of 1. And as you can see now, they both are the same size. And if you remembered that padding right class, this is where I'll create it. So padding right, what I want to do here is just apply some padding right. And it's going to be 7 rem. As you can see, we get some nice separation. What we have to do next is select the footer content. And this right here is going to have a max width of 77.5 rem. Let me actually scroll all the way back down so that you guys can see what's going on. And see, that's the nice thing of reusing classes, because I changed it for one, and then since I'm reusing it throughout the site, you see that it changes everywhere. So what I want to do now is just make sure that I center this container in the middle. So I'll do a margin of auto. And you'll see it move over. After selecting the footer content, what I want to do now is select the footer content about. And in here, I want to set another maxed width. And what I want to say here is that it's going to be 51.3 rem. And since we had some margins before that I don't want to mess up, I'll say that the margin here up top will be 0. The margin left and right will stay auto, but I want to apply some margin bottom. Well, I want the margin bottom to stay the same as we had it before. So let's make sure we still keep the 5.4 rem. And now we can just go ahead and select the divider. So footer content divider, we want to make it a flexed container so that we can have the follow along and newsletter side by side. So we can say display of flex and then justify content center to have them right here. Actually, I don't want center. I want space between. This way we can have some separation between them, as you can see right here. Then I'll select the social media as well as the newsletter form. They will have similar styles, or in this case the same ones, so might as well apply them both at the same time. The max width will be set to 27.3 rem. And then I'll do a margin top and bottom of 0 and one left and right, just so that I can create some separation between them if they ever get too close right here, although that shouldn't be the case because it's going back to one column, as you can see right here. So let's make this bigger again. What I want to do now is basically turn on the opacity to 1 on the social icons. So social icons I'll say the opacity will be set to 1. And now we want to move over the button so that it still stays inside of the input. So newsletter BTN, margin left will be set to 7.5 rem. And as you can see, it's back inside of it. And yeah, guys, that's going to be pretty much it for the website itself as far as making it responsive. So if we go back into the inspector, you'll see that all the content is nice on a mobile device. And then it's going to adjust once we make it bigger, as you can see right here. So the only thing left is to create the animations. And that's going to be the really cool part, because the animations for the hero, we're going to be doing them from scratch. So let me just make this bigger right here. And then we'll just make a comment underneath of the media queries, animations. So the first animation we're going to be creating is going to be for this fading up. So we can do add keyframes, and we can name this fade up. And we want to say that from 0%, we want to translate Y for rem. And then at 100%, we want to give it an opacity of, let's say, 1, because we want to turn off the opacity later on once we revisit these elements. And then we want to make sure that the value goes back to 0. So let's go back to the subheading right here and let's test it out. See if we can find it. So we have right here, sub headline. What we can do now is set the opacity to 0. We can't see it. And now we want to do animation and then fade up. And we want to do it, let's say, over 0.5 seconds. And we want to say forwards. And let me see where I messed up. So animation, let me see. Sub headline, fade up, forwards, opacity, animation delay. So forth. Oh, it's because we never reset this to 0. So now if we go back up right here to the 0 and we refresh it, you'll see that it'll fade in. What we want to do now is set a delay. So here for the sub headline, we say animation delay. Again, it's going to be over 0.5 seconds. And now you'll see some slight delay and then it comes in. Now we have to move up to the second animation, which is going to be for the main headline. So that's going to be pretty simple as well. Let's just find it. So what we want to do here is a scaling animation. So let's just copy this. And then we just want to switch the name. We want to say scale. Let's just say, actually, let's just call it scale. Leave it as it is. And what we want to do here is just say that we want to target the transform scale. Here we want to say the initial is going to be 2. And then we want to set it back to 1. And we want to keep this opacity the same because later on, when we go back up now, we will hide this right here. So headline, again, we can just copy this since it's going to be exactly the same. I don't think this one doesn't have a delay because it's going to be the first one. And then the name is going to be scale. So let's see. It's looking a lot better. But as you can see now, we get some issue here with overflow. So we get those horizontal scroll lines. And the reason for that is because it's display block. So it's already taking 100% of the available width. And when we scale it, it gets even bigger. So that's why we get that flickering right there. So an easy fix for that is just to go up, and let's make a rule that targets the body. So body, we want to say overflow X, and we want to set it to hidden. So now once we refresh, you'll see that we no longer get those horizontal bars. The next step will be to animate the bars and the asterisks. So let's go all the way back down. Let's see. And in here, let's just copy this. What we want to do here is just say that, can't remember what I called this one, but for the sake, let's just say grow. And what we want to do here is say that from 0%, the width will be 0, and then the width will be 100%. So as far as the grow, we can say that that's going to be applied to the lines. See if we can find them right here. And that's going to be pretty simple. We can just say again that the animation is going to be grow. And let's say it's going to last 2 seconds forwards. And then I want to set a delay right here. And it's going to be 0.9 seconds. So let's see how that looks. And we forgot to hide it. So let's set the opacity to 0. And that looks a lot better. Now, as you can see here, we have an issue with the arrows. They don't look as natural. So what I want them to do is that the lines will animate in and then the arrows will appear. So again, let's scroll all the way back down. And actually, now that I mentioned that, I think I can just apply the same animation right here. Since it's going to be pretty similar. What I can do though is just only make it last 0.5 seconds. And then I can just increase the delay, let's say to 1.2 seconds. And let's see how that looks. Also, let's make sure that we hide it by setting the opacity to 0. And that works a lot better. As you can see, the lines will animate in, followed by the triangles. So what we have to do now is create the fading down animation that will animate this text right here, as well as the button. So let's scroll all the way back down. And we can just simply call that one, I think I went down too far. We can just simply call that one fade down. And actually, it would have been more practical just to copy the first one since it's going to be pretty similar. So fade up, we want to copy it and say it's going to be called fade down. And what I want this to do is basically from 0% transform translate y negative, since it's fading down, 1. And then it's going to end up at the 0 position. And let's go back up. Oops. And what we want to do now is just grab the animation we had before, right here. And then we want to apply it to the, you see, separator, lines. Where is it? Actually, I called it right here. So if we go back into the HTML and we find it, single animation. So now we will target this particular div. I'm not exactly sure if I targeted it before or if I left it as it was, but it doesn't seem like I did. So right here, I'll say single animation. I'll create a rule for it. And I want to make sure I hide it. Opacity, set it to 0, and then fade down. And I believe that I had a different delay for it. Yeah, because right now it's like everything is just loading way too quickly. So as far as the delay, we can just do something like, I don't know, let's do 1.5 seconds. I think that works a lot better. So we'll just go with that. Yeah, it looks pretty good, so we'll keep it as it is. The final animation that I still haven't done is the spinning for the asterisk. So that's going to be pretty simple, to be honest. We can just create a keyframe animation called spin. So let's go all the way back down again to the animations. And actually this one was done for this area right here. So we'll just keep it simple and now place it under it. So I'll call this one spin. And what I want to do here at 0% is transform, rotate, and then I just want to say that I want to rotate it at 0%, well, 0, and then I want to transform, rotate at 100%. Let's make sure that we keep the opacity at 1 because it's really important. And then we want to do a whole 360. So we'll do negative 360 degrees. And then to apply it, we just go back to the asterisk. And then we can just copy this and just modify it. Let's say that the opacity here will be 0. Remember that we want to hide it. Paste it here, and we can say spin. It's going to be over 0.5 seconds, and then the delay will do 0.7. And as you can see, it spins and everything else right here animates. So that already looks pretty damn good. The one final animation here that I want to do with the keyframes is going to be here for this arrow pointing up. And that's going to be pretty simple. Let me just go back down and I'll create one more rule. And let me just call this up. And this will basically just be an opacity of 0. Then here we can just add another one at 50%. And this one will be an opacity of 1. And then finally at 100%, we want to set it back down to 0. And we want to translate the Y negative 1 rem. And then we have to apply this to the div with the class of, I believe it was like back to the top. I'm not exactly sure. Should be right here, the footer. So yeah, back to the top. And what we want to do here, actually not back to the top, but back to the top icon. So scroll down a little bit more. And we want to say animation up. It's going to be over well, it's going to last 2 seconds. And this time I want it to be infinite. So as you can see, it goes up, fades out, fades back in, and it goes up. And remember, if I click it, it's going to take us back to the hero section. So that's everything there is to it as far as the keyframes animations. Now we have to do the animations on scroll, which is going to be pretty cool. So let's go right back into the main JS. And what we want to do here is just create an instance on the window of the scroll reveal. So let's create a comment. So the first thing we have to do is say that we want to attach it to the window on scroll. So we want to say window.sr, and then we want to set it equal to scroll reveal. And let's make sure that this is also in uppercase S, scroll reveal. And now that we have that, we can access the scroll reveal by just simply using SR. So what we want to do here is say SR, and we want to say reveal. And then what we want to do next is in here, we want to select the element that we want to animate. So in this case, and we also should use a comma here. So in here, we want to select the item with the class, or items with the classes of animate left. And I'll be placing a link to the documentation for scroll reveal, just so that you guys can have it as a reference. And it's not in here that I should be placing the comma. It's actually after this right here. And this, let me just get rid of it. Actually, I probably confused you guys, so let me just do it right over. Remember, once we attach the SR, we want to grab it and say reveal. And then we want to say that we want to grab the elements with the classes of animate left. And now I can do a comma and then open up some curly braces. That's a lot better. And we have several things we could do. The origin. So the origin just means where the animation is coming from. So in this case, I want it to come from the left. And then I use a comma, and then I can say the duration. The duration is set in milliseconds. So that means that I'm going to be setting it to 1000 milliseconds, which equals to 1 second. Then the distance. So distance just means how far it's traveling from. So in this case, I'll use 25 rem. Finally, we have a delay. Well, the delay is pretty self-explanatory. It just means it's like how long should it take before the animation is triggered. So in this case, I'll do 300 milliseconds. And now if I refresh this, once I scroll down, so right here, animate left, seems like I messed up somewhere. Let's see, window S equals scroll reveal function Then scroll reveal, animate left. Actually, I think that the reason for that is because I have to refresh my browser as usual. So let's see this time. Still not working, huh? Was it because I didn't apply the class? Let me just animate left to make sure we go back and double check. So for this one, headline De Rosa, animate left. main.js. Just grab it and paste it in here again. Maybe I messed it up somehow. Say the origin is left, milliseconds, duration, distance, delay. Should be working out. I'm not exactly sure. Let me actually just double check right here. And let's just do another one just to make sure. So this one should be for, let's say, right. Scroll reveal, and then the origin should be right. And then again, 1025, and the delay for this one should be. So let's now say that I want to refresh it. Oh, so there it is. I guess there wasn't really anything wrong with it. I guess it's just like sometimes my browser be acting up when it comes to my local host and the JavaScript takes a while. So as you can see now, everything is animated on scroll except for the elements that I'm still going to be animating. So the next step is going to be targeting the animate top and animate bottom. So again, let's just paste it down. It's like, let's say that animate top, and this I can say from top, and then this can stay all the same except for the delay, which I'll set to 600, and then this will be the exact same thing for bottom. And then the origin, we have to switch it to bottom. And then the delay and everything else is still going to stay the same. So now if we go here and we refresh, animate bottom, so this is not getting the animation. Maybe I just didn't add it in. Animate top. So let's go back to the HTML document and let's find the footer. So animate. Oh, it's because I said animate up when it should have been animate top. So now if I refresh it, everything's working. But as you see, this is overflowing the content right here. So what we can do is go back to the sections. Actually, the footer content, where is it? Right here. Remember that I said we would need this. Now, you'll see that since the overflow footer content, let me see, footer content. Now you see that since the overflow is being hidden, it doesn't come into view until later on. We also have to apply the overflow if hidden to these sections. So let's go back up to the rules right here and say overflow will be set to hidden. So yeah guys, that's going to be pretty much it for this particular tutorial. I know it was a really long one, but I hope you guys found it useful and that you learned tons of new stuff. And as you can see, everything is working smoothly. And then finally, we're going to demo it one more time, but in responsive view. So for example, this would be a really small device like an iPhone 5 SE. So you can see everything is working. Let me just refresh that so we can see the animations. And then right here again, everything just looks perfect no matter the size of the screen. So yeah guys, like I said, if you guys found it useful and learned something new, make sure you smash that like button. And if you're still thinking about subscribing, hit the subscribe button too. I can't wait to bring you guys more tutorials like this one. I'll catch you guys in the next one.